I reconstructed cities as they may have appeared centuries ago. This video brings all of those reconstructions together into one continuous journey through America's past, offering a grounded visual look at how these cities once appeared before modern development reshaped them. Let's begin in Manhattan in the year 1746. When we cross the East River into Manhattan, the atmosphere changes immediately. This image from 1746 shows the ferry landing at the foot of Wall Street. At that time, Wall Street led directly to the river, and the ferry was one of the busiest places in town. People crossed constantly between Manhattan and Brooklyn. Merchants carried goods. Travelers rode on horseback. Sailors docked their boats and tied them along the landing. You can see a pavilion where passengers waited for the next ferry, and behind it are buildings that still reflect the old Dutch architecture from New Amsterdam. The image brings us into a cold, Brooklyn morning during the winter of 1760. Brooklyn at this time was not an urban center. It was rural and spread out, with families living in small wooden houses, surrounded by fields, barns, and simple roads. When snow arrived, life slowed down even more. In this scene, you can see people cutting wood, gathering supplies, and talking in small groups. Children play near the road. A horse stands quietly near a sled. The houses are modest and built close to the ground, and smoke drifts from the chimneys as families try to keep warm. This part of Brooklyn was still shaped by the rhythms of agriculture. Most families grew their own food, kept livestock, and relied on trade with nearby towns. A day in winter meant staying warm, preparing meals, and doing whatever work needed to be done to get through the colder months. By 1763, the British firmly controlled New York, and the city was becoming a more significant colonial port. This view of Fort George, which stood at the southern tip of Manhattan, reminds us of how important the harbor was to the city's economy and security. In the image, you can see ships of various sizes sailing into the harbor. Some are merchant ships carrying goods, while others belong to the British Navy. Fort George sits on the shoreline with cannons aimed out toward the water. The British flag marks the site clearly. When we move farther north, the city becomes quiet again. This view of Harlem from 1765 looks nothing like the Harlem we know today. It was mostly farmland and open landscape. The houses were small and separated by long stretches of grass, trees, and gently sloping terrain. In the painting, you can see a few boats on the water. Families likely used these small boats to fish or travel short distances. The forests behind the houses appear thick and untouched. The entire area feels calm and slow. If you picture Manhattan today, it can be hard to imagine that large parts of the island were once rural like this. Even in the mid-17th century, development had not yet reached this far north. People who lived in Harlem worked the land, raised animals, and lived at a peaceful distance from the busy port downtown. By 1776, New York was no longer a small colonial town. It had become a large settlement with busy wharves, rows of homes, multiple churches, and steady movement on the water. The city's waterfront shows a place that was ready to grow into something far larger. Ships fill the harbor. Houses stand close together. The shoreline is more defined, and the entire area looks more organized than it did in earlier years. This is the moment when New York begins to look more like a major city. The year 1776 is important for another reason. The Declaration of Independence was signed, and the colonies were officially in open rebellion. New York's size and location made it a target for both sides. The city was valuable, and both armies wanted control of it. This waterfront scene shows the city at the edge of a major conflict. After the Battle of Long Island, the British captured New York. They would hold it for the remainder of the Revolutionary War, from 1776 until 1783. The occupation changed daily life for everyone living in the city. The image shows British soldiers marching through the streets. Officers ride on horseback. Civilians stand on the sidewalks and watch quietly. The scene feels controlled, but underneath it, there must have been fear, tension, and uncertainty. During the occupation, fires destroyed parts of the city. Supplies were often limited. People were forced to choose sides or keep their opinions hidden. New York also became a center for British military operations. It was full of soldiers, prisoners, spies, and political activity. For 7 years, New Yorkers lived under foreign rule. When the war finally ended and the British left, the city had changed physically and emotionally. But the end of the occupation also opened the door for a new beginning. These images show a version of New York that most people never imagine. A place of snow-covered villages, quiet farmland, busy docks, and crowded colonial streets. A place shaped by everyday people who lived through dramatic change. By the time the revolution ended, New York was ready to grow into a new role. It would soon become the temporary capital of the United States, and later, one of the greatest port cities in the world. This early history reminds us that New York has always been shaped by movement, trade, conflict, and community. Even in the 1700s, the city was already becoming something larger than itself. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this look into New York before it became the city we know today. This view shows San Francisco when it was still a small settlement known as Yerba Buena. The town sits quietly along the bay, with only a handful of buildings and wide open hills behind them. A few ships rest in the calm water, hinting at early trade, but nothing close to the busy port the city would become. Streets are simple dirt paths, and the landscape feels more like a rural outpost than a future metropolis. This scene captures the city right before everything changed, only a year before the gold rush brought a flood of people and rapid growth. This engraving shows the Bank of California, one of the first major financial institutions in the West. The building stands out with its heavy stone arches and detailed facade, a sign that San Francisco was becoming a city with real economic weight. Horse-drawn carriages and people moving along the street give a sense of a growing downtown. This illustration captures a tense moment in San Francisco's history. In 1880, members of the Working Men's Party gathered on the sandlots near the old City Hall to protest against Chinese immigrants. These rallies grew out of economic frustration, but they often turned into anger directed at the city's Chinese community, who faced discrimination and violence throughout this period. This painting shows San Francisco right as the gold rush was beginning. The town is small but buzzing with activity, with tents, simple houses, and busy paths leading toward the bay. Ships crowd the water, carrying people from around the world who came hoping to strike it rich. The hills in the background remind us how young the city still was, with most of its growth happening in a matter of months. This view shows San Francisco right before the gold rush transformed it. The town is still small but already taking shape, with clusters of wooden buildings stretching toward the bay. A few ships anchor offshore, hinting at early trade and the city's connection to the wider world. People gather on the hillside in the foreground, looking out over a place that was beginning to feel like a real community. In just a few years, this quiet town would explode with new arrivals and rapid construction. This image captures the last moment before that wave of growth changed San Francisco forever. This panorama captures San Francisco only a few years after the gold rush began, and the change is dramatic. What had been a small settlement is now a crowded landscape of buildings, tents, and makeshift camps stretching toward the bay. Thousands of people poured into the city, and the rush for gold created a chaotic but energetic atmosphere. ships fill the waterfront, many abandoned by crews who hurried inland. On the hillsides, newcomers set up temporary camps while the city tried to keep up with its sudden growth. This view shows a young San Francisco in the middle of a massive transformation. This photograph shows Portsmouth Square at a time when San Francisco was still figuring out what kind of city it would become. The streets are little more than packed dirt, and the buildings feel temporary, as if they were put up quickly to meet the demands of a fast-growing population. Small businesses line the square, offering supplies, lodging, and services to newcomers arriving from all over the world. The hills behind the square are dotted with scattered houses and footpaths, giving a sense of how new and unfinished the city was. Portsmouth Square soon became a central gathering place in early San Francisco. This photograph shows the port at one of its busiest moments in the early 1850s. Ships crowd every corner of the waterfront, many of them abandoned by crews who rushed inland to search for gold. The masts create a forest of lines against the water, showing how quickly San Francisco became a key hub for trade and travel. The city below the port is dense with new buildings, most of them put up in a hurry to handle the constant flow of people and supplies. This panoramic illustration shows San Francisco as a fully established city by the late 1870s. The street grid stretches far across the peninsula, filling in areas that had been open land only a few decades earlier. Neighborhoods are packed with houses, businesses, and churches, and the waterfront is lined with piers and ships of all kinds. The hills in the background are still mostly undeveloped, giving a sense of how quickly the city grew outward from the bay. Main Street tells you everything about Houston 1 year after the Civil War ends. Those brick facades with their fancy arched windows are trying hard to look sophisticated, but the unpaved street and that lone cow wandering through give away the reality. This is still a frontier town. The buildings house cotton factors, merchants and traders picking up where they left off before the war. Houston survived the conflict mostly intact because Union forces never made it this far inland. Now the city's ready to capitalize on that luck. Texas cotton needs to move, and Houston sits perfectly positioned between the plantations and the coast. Houston spreads across the Texas prairie in a perfect grid. But look closely at what's really happening here. Those rail lines cutting through the city aren't just transportation. They're Houston's future being written in iron. The city has positioned itself as the ultimate railroad junction, with tracks radiating outward like spokes on a wheel. Buffalo Bayou snakes through the southern edge, the waterway that started it all back in 1836. But now it's the railroads calling the shots. Cotton warehouses line the tracks, lumberyards stack high, and merchants are getting rich moving goods between the Gulf Coast and the interior. This grid pattern you see isn't accidental. Houston's founders planned for growth, laying out blocks that could expand infinitely across the flat coastal plain, and they're filling up fast. White Oak Bayou hums with activity as steamboats dock alongside the railroad bridge. This is Houston's transportation revolution in one frame. The city isn't choosing between water and rail, it's using both. Steamboats haul cargo up from Galveston and the Gulf, then trains take over for the journey inland. That railroad bridge towering over the bayou isn't just crossing water, it's connecting Houston to every corner of Texas. The warehouses lining the banks are packed with cotton, lumber, and manufactured goods. Houston's bet on being the ultimate middleman is paying off big time. Electric streetcars roll down Main Street, past 2- and 3-story commercial buildings packed with shops and offices. This is Houston's commercial heart beating strong. The overhead wires powering those trolleys represent cutting-edge technology for the 1890s. Pedestrians crowd the wooden sidewalks, moving between dry goods stores, banks, and saloons. The buildings might look modest compared to what's coming, but they're substantial for their era, built to last and built for business. Houston's population has hit 27,000, and the city's spreading outward block by block, following those streetcar lines into what used to be prairie. Spindletop changes everything. When the Lucas Gusher blows on January 10th near Beaumont, 90 miles from Houston, it shoots oil 150 feet into the air for 9 days straight. Those derricks you see sprouting like a forest represent the greatest oil discovery in American history. Spindletop produces more oil in a single day than the rest of the world's wells combined. Houston, perfectly positioned between the oil fields and the coast, becomes the logical headquarters for this new industry. Fortunes are made overnight. The city that built itself on cotton and railroads is about to become the oil capital of the world. Cotton bales stretch as far as you can see, stacked high on rail cars waiting to move. This is what Houston's economy looks like in physical form. Every bale represents Texas farmland, backbreaking labor, and the commodity that built this city. The smokestacks in the background belong to cotton compresses, factories that squeeze bales smaller, so more can fit on each rail car and ship. Houston handles more cotton than almost any city in America, and it shows. The rail yard runs non-stop, loading and unloading, while merchants negotiate prices and fortunes change hands. King Cotton still rules, and Houston is his capital. Houston's new city hall doesn't apologize for anything. Those elaborate towers, the Romanesque arches, the ornate stonework, this building screams confidence. The city's population has hit 78,000 and climbing. Oil discovered at Spindletop in 1901 is starting to reshape the economy, but Houston isn't abandoning its cotton roots. It's adding oil money on top. City leaders want a government building that matches their ambitions, something that tells the world Houston has arrived as a major American city. The Victorian grandeur you see here is Houston declaring itself a power player. Chicago in 1820 was little more than a meeting place at the edge of vast open land. This illustration shows a quiet stretch along the river, where a few cabins sat close to the water and canoes moved at an easy pace. The landscape feels wide and untouched, shaped more by nature than by people. You can see how the river's bends guided early travel and trade, long before streets or railways took over. It's a simple scene, but it captures the moment when Chicago was still a frontier outpost, waiting for the growth that would change it forever. This 1853 bird's eye view shows Chicago right before everything changed. The city is small but buzzing with energy. You can see the grid forming, the river cutting through the center, and ships working the shoreline as trade grows. By 1857, Chicago looks completely different. The grid is now packed, the streets feel tighter, and the shoreline is busier than ever. You can see new industry taking shape along the river and more ships filling the harbor. The city is still young, but it's clear it's growing faster than anyone planned. Neighborhoods stretch far into the distance, giving a sense of how quickly people arrived, built homes, and connected everything with straight lines and rail lines. This photo captures Chicago in the quiet shock that followed the Great Fire of 1871. The city's core was reduced to broken columns, roofless walls, and piles of brick that once held entire blocks. The Grand Pacific Hotel and the Honoré Block stand in the distance as hollow shells, reminders of what had been there only days before. The scene feels still, almost unreal, as if the fire had swept through overnight and left the city frozen mid-breath. This illustration captures the fire in its earliest, most chaotic hours. What began near the O'Leary barn on the west side quickly turned into a wall of flames racing toward the river. A hard wind pushed burning debris from rooftop to rooftop, jumping streets and sweeping through entire blocks before people had time to react. From the water, the city looks like it's dissolving into smoke. Crowds gather along the pier, watching helplessly as the fire reaches the edge of the Chicago River, a barrier that once seemed dependable. In this moment, you can feel the fear of a city losing control. This drawing shows Chicago's early Union Depot at Adams, Canal, and Madison Streets, back when the city was growing fast and rail travel shaped everyday life. The station has a proud, almost ornate look, with tall mansard roofs and long covered platforms stretching out on both sides. Horse-drawn wagons and carriages crowd the dusty street, dropping off passengers or hauling freight. People move in and out of the depot with a sense of steady purpose. You can feel how important this place was. It wasn't just a train station. It was a gateway into a city that was learning how big it could be. This photo drops you right into the heart of the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, Chicago's famous White City. You're looking over the Grand Basin toward the gleaming dome of the administration building, while the statue in the foreground seems to watch the whole scene unfold. Boats glide across the water, and the wide plazas are filled with visitors taking in a celebration meant to show the world what Chicago could become after the Great Fire. It feels both ambitious and surreal. A temporary city built to make a statement that Chicago was ready for the world stage. Looking back at these early moments, it's easy to see how much Chicago has reinvented itself. The quiet riverbank, the rough wooden streets, the first theaters and train stations, the rise from the Great Fire, and the bold new skyline all tell one long story of determination. Baltimore in 1752 was still a small but fast-growing port town built around the natural harbor of the Patapsco River. Founded just a few decades earlier in 1729, the settlement quickly became important because of its deep, sheltered waters and access to inland farms. Tobacco, grain, and timber moved through this harbor, connecting Maryland's interior to the wider Atlantic world. At this stage, Baltimore had no grand skyline. Most buildings were modest wooden or brick structures spread along rolling hills and the waterfront. The town's layout was informal, shaped more by trade routes and geography than by careful planning. Small wharves lined the shore, serving merchant ships that carried goods to Britain and the Caribbean. In late 1776, Baltimore briefly became the political center of the American Revolution. After British forces threatened Philadelphia, the Second Continental Congress fled the city and reconvened here, meeting inside the Henry Fight House. At the time, it was one of the largest buildings in Baltimore, originally built as a tavern and lodging house. From December 1776 to February 1777, this building served as the temporary seat of the United States government. Key decisions were made here during one of the darkest moments of the war, as George Washington's army struggled and morale was low. The move to Baltimore was driven by necessity, but it also highlighted the city's growing strategic importance. By the 1770s, Baltimore's harbor was already the engine of the city's growth. What began as a small tobacco port had turned into one of the busiest ports in the American colonies. Ships crowded the waterfront, loading flour, grain, timber, and iron for export across the Atlantic and throughout the Caribbean. This period marked Baltimore's shift toward commerce and shipbuilding rather than plantation trade. The port supported skilled craftsmen, merchants, dock workers, and sailors, creating a diverse and fast-growing urban population. Its deep harbor and access to inland rivers made it especially valuable as trade expanded westward. This 1792 map by A.P. Foley and James Poupart captures Baltimore at a moment when it was transitioning from a port town into a structured American city. The street grid is becoming more regular, especially around the harbor, reflecting deliberate urban planning rather than organic colonial growth. The map shows how closely the city developed around waterways. Jones Falls and the inner harbor shaped trade routes, industry, and neighborhoods. Warehouses, shipyards, and markets clustered near the water, while residential areas spread outward along newly laid streets. This image shows the construction of the National Road, later known as the Cumberland Road, the first major highway funded by the U.S. federal government. Authorized by Congress in 1806 and built between 1811 and 1834, the road was designed to link the eastern states with the western frontier. Stretching roughly 820 miles from Cumberland, Maryland, toward the Ohio River, the road passed through present-day Maryland, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. Leaders like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson believed a reliable trans-Appalachian route was essential to hold the young nation together. Parts of it eventually became U.S. Route 40. This lithograph by William James Bennett captures Baltimore at a moment when it was emerging as one of the most important port cities in the United States. By the early 19th century, Baltimore had become a major gateway for goods moving between the Atlantic world and the American interior. Its harbor handled flour, tobacco, grain, and manufactured products, while shipbuilding and related industries fueled steady growth. Federal Hill itself was not just a scenic overlook. During the War of 1812, it played a defensive role, with fortifications positioned to protect the city and the harbor from attack. In 1857, Baltimore launched its first steam tug, marking a major shift in how the port operated. Unlike earlier wooden vessels, this tug was built with a sheet iron hull, the first of its kind in the harbor. That choice reflected the city's growing industrial capabilities and its willingness to adopt new technologies. Steam tugs transformed port life. They made it easier to maneuver large sailing ships through crowded docks and narrow channels, regardless of wind or tide. For a busy commercial port like Baltimore, this meant faster turnarounds, safer navigation, and increased efficiency in moving goods. By the mid-19th century, Baltimore City Jail stood as one of the most imposing public buildings in the city. Built on a hill east of downtown, its fortress-like design reflected how punishment and order were viewed at the time. The complex housed prisoners awaiting trial, convicted criminals and debtors, often all under the same roof. The jail became infamous during periods of unrest, especially in the years leading up to and during the Civil War, when political prisoners and suspected sympathizers were also confined here. This building tells a broader story about Baltimore's rapid growth. As the city expanded through industry and immigration, its institutions struggled to keep pace. The jail was not just a place of confinement, but a symbol of the social tensions, inequality, and challenges faced by a booming 19th century American city. By 1869, Baltimore Harbor had become one of the busiest and most important ports in the United States. The harbor was packed with sailing ships, steam-powered vessels, and crowded wharves lined with warehouses, shipyards, and factories. Goods flowed in and out daily, including grain, tobacco, coal, manufactured products, and raw materials feeding the city's growing industries. This period marks Baltimore's transition from a traditional seaport to a modern industrial harbor. Rail lines connected the docks directly to inland markets, allowing cargo to move quickly between ships, trains, and factories. Immigrants arriving through the harbor also fueled the city's rapid population growth, supplying labor for mills, railroads, and shipbuilding. The dense forest of masts and smokestacks visible here reflects Baltimore's economic power in the post-Civil War era. The harbor was not just a gateway to the Atlantic, but a driving force behind the city's rise as a major commercial and industrial center in 19th century America. This panoramic print from 1872 shows Baltimore at the height of its 19th century expansion. From an elevated viewpoint, the city spreads outward in dense rows of brick buildings, church spires, and broad streets, with the Washington Monument standing prominently at the center. By this time, Baltimore was a fully mature industrial city, shaped by commerce, railroads, and port activity. The image captures a city transitioning from its early mercantile roots into a modern urban center. Neighborhoods extend far beyond the original harbor core, reflecting rapid population growth and rising prosperity after the Civil War. It's a carefully composed view meant to showcase Baltimore's order, ambition, and civic pride. This lithograph from 1884 depicts Camp Carroll, a military installation on the outskirts of Baltimore used primarily by the Maryland National Guard. The orderly layout of barracks, parade grounds, and support buildings reflects the growing professionalism of American military forces in the late 19th century. Camp Carroll represents Baltimore's strategic importance as both a transportation hub and a center for regional defense. Rail lines nearby allowed for quick movement of troops and supplies, tying the camp directly into the city's industrial infrastructure. Scenes like this highlight how military, urban growth, and industry became increasingly interconnected during this period of American history. This engraving shows Washington at a moment when the city was more idea than reality. You can see how empty the landscape still was. A long, straight road cuts toward a small cluster of buildings that would eventually become the heart of the capital. Most of what surrounds it is open land, scattered houses, and young poplar trees planted to mark the path toward Pennsylvania Avenue. It feels quiet, almost rural. Hard to believe this place would grow into the center of national power. In 1800, it was still a rough start, full of hope, but far from finished. The Eisenhower Executive Office building looks almost unreal in this old engraving. It rises like a giant stone fortress dressed in French Second Empire style. Sharp roofs, heavy ornament, endless windows. When it was completed in the late 1800s, it was the largest office building in the world, and you can feel that ambition in the scale of it. This scene captures one of the darkest days in early Washington. After winning the Battle of Bladensburg in 1814, British troops marched straight into the capital. This painting shows Washington in 1833, long before the city filled in its empty spaces. You're looking at it from across the Anacostia River, where the hills still feel rural and untouched. The capital stands on the horizon, bright and heavy, almost floating over the landscape. The White House sits to the left, drawn a bit larger than life to balance the scene. The Navy Yard and small clusters of buildings stretch along the water. Sailing ships move slowly across the river, and the whole city feels young, wide open, and still deciding what it will become. This view of Camp Fry in 1863 shows Washington in the middle of the Civil War, but the scene feels surprisingly calm from above. Rows of barracks line the open grounds, neat and orderly, almost like a small town built inside the capital. Soldiers gather in formation along the main parade route. This 1888 bird's-eye view shows Washington at a moment when the city finally starts to look like the capital we know. The Washington Monument rises clean and bright at the center, surrounded by a landscape that feels carefully designed. Curved paths, man-made lakes, and wide lawns stretch toward the Potomac. The city beyond is dense and organized, with government buildings anchoring the horizon. The whole scene gives the impression of a capital coming into its own, confident and planned. You can see how the quiet, scattered Washington of earlier decades is giving way to something larger and more intentional. This view of Brown's Indian Queen Hotel shows Washington when it was still more town than capital. The building stretches across Pennsylvania Avenue with a clean, symmetrical facade, framed by young trees and steady foot traffic. Carriages pause at the curb, and people move in and out with an easy rhythm that suggests the hotel was a natural meeting point. It feels like one of those places where travelers, politicians, and locals all cross paths without much ceremony. You can sense a city still finding itself, but already full of small hubs like this that held daily life together. This photograph captures the Capitol in a moment of transition, with the new dome still rising behind Lincoln as he prepared to take office. The scaffolding gives the building an unfinished look, almost like the country itself in early 1861. The trees are bare, the sky is flat, and everything feels a little tense and uncertain. You can imagine people walking past, aware that change was coming, but not fully ready for what the next months would bring. The half-built dome stands there as a quiet reminder that the nation was about to be tested in ways no one could predict. This early view of the Capitol shows Washington still taking shape. The landscape feels open and unfinished, with a dirt road curving toward the building and a few scattered trees breaking up the horizon. The Capitol itself looks smaller than we imagine it today, almost restrained, but already carrying the weight of its new role. You can see carriages gathered out front and people moving around with a sense of purpose, as if they're adjusting to a city that is only beginning to find its identity. It's a snapshot of a capital that was still more idea than reality. Harper's new monthly magazine publishes this engraving of Seattle, capturing the young lumber town from Elliott Bay. The settlement clings to steep hills rising from the waterfront, with dense forests of Douglas fir crowding close behind. Sawmills line the shore, their logs floating in the harbor. About 1,100 people live here. Railroad tracks cut through downtown Seattle in July 1889. The cable car system connects the waterfront to the hilltop neighborhoods, carrying passengers up slopes too steep for horses. Buildings crowd both sides of the tracks, their wooden construction typical of frontier boomtowns. Telegraph poles line the street. This is Seattle 1 month after the Great Fire destroyed the entire commercial district. The city is already rebuilding faster and grander than before. The fire becomes Seattle's opportunity to fix everything wrong with the old city, raise the streets above tide level, install modern sewers, build in brick and stone instead of wood. Mill Street bustles with activity one day before catastrophe. The Corn Block, Yesler Leary Building, and Occidental Hotel stand solid and prosperous along the street. Pedestrians move between shops and offices, unaware tomorrow will change everything. At 2:30 p.m. on June 6th, a pot of glue will catch fire in a cabinet shop. The fire will spread through the tinder-dry wooden buildings, destroying 25 city blocks in less than 12 hours. But the Great Fire becomes Seattle's rebirth. The city rebuilds in fireproof brick and stone, raises street levels, and emerges as a modern metropolis. Smoke billows down Front Street as crowds gather to watch their city burn. The fire is already out of control, jumping from building to building through the densely packed wooden structures. Seattle's volunteer firefighters fight desperately, but water pressure is too weak to reach the flames. The fire will consume everything from the waterfront to First Hill, destroying most of downtown. Miraculously, no one dies. The city refuses to surrender. Before the ashes cool, Business owners are already making plans to rebuild bigger and better than before. The Occidental Hotel stands in ruins at Yesler Way and James Street, its brick walls collapsed and interior gutted. This scene repeats across 25 blocks of downtown Seattle. The fire destroyed $20 million in property, leaving 5,000 people unemployed and thousands homeless. But Seattle sees opportunity in disaster. The city immediately passes strict building codes requiring fireproof construction. Merchants set up temporary stores in tents while permanent brick buildings rise around them. Within a year, the new downtown will be more impressive than what burned, built on raised streets with modern infrastructure. First Avenue stretches north from Pioneer Square, lined with substantial brick and stone buildings that replace the wooden structures lost in the Great Fire. Electric streetcars glide down tracks alongside horse-drawn wagons and early automobiles. The street is busy with pedestrians moving between shops, hotels, and offices. Overhead, electrical wires crisscross the sky. This is Seattle rebuilt and modernized, transformed from frontier town to genuine city in just 11 years. The Klondike Gold Rush of 1897 to 1898 brought another wave of growth, making Seattle the gateway to Alaska and doubling the population again. From King Street Station, the view sweeps across downtown Seattle toward Elliott Bay. The Alaska Building briefly holds the title of city's tallest structure. It's 14 stories, marking Seattle's vertical ambitions. The waterfront is packed with warehouses, docks, and industrial buildings serving the maritime trade. Smoke rises from steamships and factories. Seattle is booming, its population approaching 237,000. The city processes timber, coal, fish, and goods flowing to and from Alaska. The steep hills that once hindered development now give Seattle its distinctive character, with buildings stacked up slopes toward the skyline. Seattle's downtown post office occupies an entire block, its neoclassical facade projecting permanence and federal authority. The massive building features columns, grand stairs, and ornate detailing that announce Seattle's importance as a major American city. Streetcars pass in front, while automobiles and horse-drawn vehicles share the road. This is the architecture of confidence. Seattle has arrived and expects to keep growing. The post office handles enormous volumes of mail connecting Seattle to Alaska, Asia, and the rest of America. The building represents the city's role as commercial center for the entire Pacific Northwest. Market Street, Philadelphia, early 1700s. This view looks down Market Street, the main civic spine of colonial Philadelphia. At this time, the city was still young but already carefully planned, with wide streets laid out by William Penn to avoid the overcrowding seen in European cities. The building in view is Philadelphia's first courthouse, while Christ Church rises just north on 2nd Street, soon to become one of the most important religious centers in the colonies. Market Street was where law, commerce, and daily life met. House of Employment and Pennsylvania Hospital, Philadelphia. This view shows the House of Employment, also known as the Arms House, alongside Pennsylvania Hospital on the edge of Philadelphia. These institutions reflect how the city was beginning to organize public welfare. The Arms House housed the poor, unemployed, elderly, and mentally ill, while Pennsylvania Hospital, founded in 1751, was the first hospital in the American colonies. Painting completed in 1772 by Benjamin West shows William Penn meeting with Native American leaders to mark a treaty of peace in early Pennsylvania. The scene refers to agreements made in the late 1600s, when Penn promoted negotiation and coexistence rather than conquest. Unlike many colonial treaties, these agreements were remembered as relatively fair, at least in intent. West painted this during a tense moment in colonial history, just before the American Revolution. Cape Florida Lighthouse stands alone on the southern tip of Key Biscayne. the oldest structure in what will one day become Miami. The brick tower guides ships navigating the treacherous Florida reefs, warning them away from the shallow waters that have claimed countless vessels. The keeper's dwelling sits beside it, surrounded by palm trees and scrub. This is remote, dangerous duty. In 1836, Seminole warriors will attack the lighthouse, forcing keeper John Thompson to flee to the top as flames consume the wooden stairs below him. For now, the light sweeps across empty coastline where a great city will rise. The blacksmith shop at Fort Dallas represents almost the entire settlement of Miami. A handful of people live at the mouth of the Miami River, mostly connected to Richard Fitzpatrick's abandoned plantation, or William English's attempts to revive it. The Second and Third Seminole Wars devastated this area, and Miami remains sparsely populated through most of the 19th century. By the 1890s, Julia Tuttle and the Brickell family own most of the land, waiting for the right moment to develop it. That moment comes soon when Henry Flagler extends his railroad south, transforming this frontier outpost into a city virtually overnight. Miami Beach doesn't exist yet as a city, just a barrier island accessible only by boat. From the air above Government Cut, you can see the Miami Beach Kennel Club on the left and South Beach's pier stretching into the Atlantic. North of the small hotel cluster sits Lummis Park, named after the Lummis brothers, who are developing the southern end of the beach. John Newton Lummis will become Miami Beach's first mayor in 1915. The island is mostly mangroves and mosquitoes, but developers see potential. They're already dredging, filling, and planning the resort destination that will rival anything in the world. Espanola Way captures the romantic vision of Miami Beach in the 1920s boom. The Spanish village features Mediterranean revival architecture with terracotta tile roofs, stucco walls, and wrought iron balconies. Developer NBT Roney imagines this as an artist colony, a bohemian enclave within the resort paradise. The street is quiet, elegant, and deliberately picturesque. In a few years, the Depression will halt Miami's explosive growth, but these buildings survive as monuments to the era when developers believed they could create instant European charm in the Florida sand. The architecture becomes iconic Miami Beach. Las Vegas is barely more than a dusty railroad town scattered across the Mojave Desert. From above, you can see the grid of streets radiating from the rail depot, but most of the valley remains empty scrubland. About 5,000 people live here, dependent on the railroad and ranching. The town exists because the San Pedro, Los Angeles, and Salt Lake Railroad needed a water stop. Beyond the small cluster of buildings, nothing but desert stretches to the horizon. No one imagines this barren landscape will become the entertainment capital of the world. The Flamingo Hotel rises from the desert like a mirage. Mobster Bugsy Siegel builds the first truly luxurious resort casino on the Strip, opening on December 26, 1946. Named after his girlfriend Virginia Hill, nicknamed the Flamingo for her long legs. The hotel cost $6 million and nearly bankrupts its investors. The opening night is a disaster, but the Flamingo establishes the template: luxury accommodations, top entertainment, fine dining, and casino gambling all under one roof. Siegel won't live to see his vision succeed. 6 months after opening, he's murdered in Beverly Hills, but the Flamingo proves the concept works. Las Vegas officially incorporates on June 1st, 1911. Fremont Street looks raw and new, with wooden buildings, dirt roads, and telegraph pole. The vote is close: 168 in favor, 57 opposed. The town exists primarily to serve the railroad, with saloons, boarding houses, and supply stores lining the main street. Population hovers around 800. No one votes for incorporation imagining neon lights and casinos. They're just trying to establish basic municipal services: water, sewage, police. But this official recognition gives Las Vegas the legal framework it will later exploit to become something unprecedented. We're looking south down Broadway from Temple Street, and Los Angeles is transforming from a frontier town into a real city. The Times Mirror printing house dominates the foreground, churning out newspapers for the city's 200,000 residents. In the distance, the 1888 City Hall stands proud on the 200 block, though it will soon be overshadowed by bigger buildings. To the right, Fort Moore Hill still rises over the landscape. Within a few years, it will be leveled completely, a race to make room for the expanding downtown grid. The Redstone Courthouse and Post Office rises at the corner of Main and Temple, and it's the most impressive building Los Angeles has ever seen. Built from red Arizona sandstone, this Romanesque revival masterpiece houses federal courts and the city's main post office under one ornate roof. The clock tower dominates the skyline, visible from across the growing downtown. Palm trees frame the grand entrance, a reminder that this federal authority now extends to a distinctly California landscape. The building will serve the city for 45 years before being demolished in 1936, replaced by a newer, larger federal courthouse. Stretches out from San Pedro, and sailing vessels bob at anchor in the calm water. Railroad tracks run right onto the docks, connecting the port directly to downtown Los Angeles, 20 miles away. Oil derricks crowd the landscape where Marina Peninsula now sits, a dense forest of wooden towers pumping black gold from beneath the ground. It's January 1942, and America has just entered World War II. This oil will fuel the war effort, powering ships, planes, and vehicles across the Pacific Theater. Spring Street is the place to be in Los Angeles, and this view north from 2nd Street shows why. The Hollenbeck Hotel commands the southwest corner, offering the finest accommodations in the city. Across the street, the Bryson Bonebreak block rises with its distinctive turrets and bay windows. Streetcars run down the center, carrying passengers through the commercial heart of downtown. In the background on Pound Cake Hill, the county courthouse looks down on the bustling streets below. Los Angeles is barely 50 years old as an American city, but it's already building like there's no tomorrow. The Hollywoodland sign goes up on Mount Lee, and it's pure real estate marketing. Developer Harry Chandler erected these massive letters to advertise a new housing subdivision in the hills above Hollywood. Each letter stands 50 feet tall and is studded with thousands of light bulbs that blink in sequence at night. By the mid-19th century, Jersey City was already transforming from marshland into a strategic industrial hub. This 1854 panorama captures the city at a turning point, with rail lines, docks, and ferry routes tying it directly to New York Harbor. At the time, Jersey City was benefiting from its position as a transportation gateway, where goods arriving by rail met ships bound for domestic and international trade. The scene reflects an era when manufacturing, shipping, and immigration were accelerating growth. Rail terminals made Jersey City a key link between the American interior and the Atlantic world, while its waterfront fueled shipbuilding and commerce. For about 30 years in the early 1800s, Edge's Windmill was one of the most recognizable landmarks in Lower Jersey City. It stood near the corner of Montgomery and Green Streets, built on a long pier extending into the waterfront. The mill was an octagonal stone tower, 7 stories high, powered entirely by wind. The structure was a direct copy of a windmill owned by the Edge family in Derbyshire, England. It was shipped in parts to New Jersey and carefully assembled after Isaac Edge settled here in 1806. Originally fitted with canvas sails, the mill was later upgraded with iron fans after a powerful storm destroyed the originals in 1821. This image captures Jersey City as it appeared from the water in 1866, seen from a ship's mast directly opposite Montgomery Street. The harbour dominates the scene. Sailboats, steam vessels, and ferries move steadily across the Hudson, showing how closely the city's life was tied to maritime traffic. Along the shoreline, warehouses, docks, and industrial buildings line the waterfront, reflecting Jersey City's growing role as a transportation and manufacturing hub. Viewed from the water, the city feels busy but still low and spread out, far from the skyline that would come later. This perspective reminds us that for much of the 19th century, Jersey City was first and foremost a working port city shaped by ships, trade, and constant movement across the river. Between 1854 and 1883, the city changed rapidly, both in size and character. Small, semi-rural settlements across Hudson County were absorbed into a single, organized city, allowing coordinated development of streets, rail lines, ports, and utilities. This period saw explosive growth in rail yards, factories, warehouses, and ship terminals, especially along the Hudson waterfront. Jersey City became a critical gateway for goods moving between the interior of the United States and New York Harbor. Immigration surged, neighborhoods expanded, and industrial employment replaced farming and small trade as the dominant way of life. By the early 1880s, Jersey City was no longer a collection of quiet towns. It had become a dense industrial city, tightly linked to national commerce and transportation, and largely unrecognizable compared to what existed just one generation earlier. Completed in 1896, Jersey City's new City Hall symbolized the city's arrival as a major industrial and civic center. Designed in a grand Beaux-Arts style, the building reflected confidence, wealth, and ambition at the height of Jersey City's rapid growth. Its domes, towers, and monumental facade were meant to project stability and modern governance to residents and visitors alike. The construction of a new city hall came after decades of consolidation and expansion, when Jersey City had transformed from scattered waterfront towns into a unified metropolis. By the 1890s, the city managed the complex systems of transportation, public works, immigration, and industry, all requiring a centralized seat of government. This engraving captures Boston just after it began to see itself as a true Atlantic hub. From the harbor, the town rises in a mix of church steeples, wharves, and tightly packed roofs, showing how quickly the shoreline filled with life and commerce. Ships crowd the water and hint at the trade networks that kept the city running. Nothing here feels quiet or provincial. Boston is busy, connected, and already pushing past its limits. Even from a distance, you can sense a place growing into its future, one sail at a time. This engraving captures the moment Boston pushed back in a way the world couldn't ignore. Under the cover of night, local men boarded ships in the harbor and tossed chests of British tea into the water. The scene feels tense but deliberate. You see figures moving quickly on deck, the tea chests breaking open as they hit the waves, and crowds gathering along the shoreline to witness the act. It wasn't chaos. It was a pointed message about control, taxes, and a government that wasn't listening. This night became a spark that helped drive the colonies toward open rebellion. This watercolor gives us a calm but tense look at Boston in the early months of the Revolution. You're seeing the landscape from Beacon Hill, looking out toward Boston Neck, where British lines cut the town off from the mainland. The houses look quiet, almost peaceful, but that calm is misleading. Just beyond the horizon, thousands of soldiers were dug in after the Battle of Bunker Hill. Two figures in the foreground point toward the British positions, a reminder that everyday life and military danger sat side by side. The wide, open view captures a city under pressure, waiting for whatever came next. This 1775 map gives us a clear look at how the British viewed Boston at the start of the Revolutionary War. It isn't just a city plan, it's a military assessment. You can see the tight streets, the narrow peninsula, and the fortifications marked with careful detail. Boston's geography made it both valuable and vulnerable. The British understood that whoever controlled the neck and the harbour controlled the town. This map shows how they prepared for siege, tightening their defences as tensions with the colonists grew. It's a snapshot of Boston right before everything changed. This illustration recreates the moment British troops arrived at Long Wharf in 1768. Even though it was made much later, it leans into the style of 18th century woodcuts to capture the tension of that day. You can feel the crowd pressing in, the soldiers marching in tight lines, and the ship looming over the waterfront. Boston's skyline looks uneven and improvised, which fits the period. The scene shows a city on edge. The arrival of these troops wasn't just military reinforcement. It signaled a turning point in the growing conflict between Boston's residents and the British government, setting the stage for the years to come.